Hello everyone, this is Dr. Zishan Mahmood. In this lecture, I will go over target costing, which falls into syllabus area B of ACCA paper Performance Management. So let's have some background idea about the concept of target costing. So let's start with how we do costing traditionally. Now traditionally, we calculate cost by adding up the different components of cost, whether it is an actual cost or estimated cost. So we add up direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead to arrive at the manufacturing cost, and then we add non-manufacturing overheads to arrive at the total cost. And with this cost, we add profit, which could be the markup or margin, to arrive at selling price, because selling price, which is based on costing, we also call it cost plus pricing, we add profit markup or margin to the cost to arrive at selling price. Now that selling price is okay in previous era, but now when the world has become more and more competitive, this approach of pricing seems not realistic. Because what could happen is that we'd set the selling price based on our cost without looking into the perceptions of the customers and without looking into how our competitors are pricing their products. So we go to the market with our preset price based on cost, and we come to know that customer is not ready to pay that price because somehow competitors are selling at lower price. In a competitive world, we can't do this. Because if we set a high price, the market may reject that price. So we can no longer be setting our price based on cost only. So in a competitive market, the price of product may be determined by the market, and companies, they have to accept the market price. Now that means that we have to focus now on costing, because market price is already set by the market. Now we have to ensure the margin, and one of the way of ensuring the margin with a preset price by the market is to focus on cost, and is to consider a costing approach that guarantees an acceptable margin. Now target costing is one such approach, which can be defined as a structured approach. Now, the reason it is called a structured approach is because it has certain procedure and certain steps, which if we follow one after the other, we arrive at the target cost. So it can be defined as a structured approach for determining the cost at which a proposed product with specified functionality and quality must be produced to generate a desired level of profitability at its anticipated selling price. So one thing is for sure, we anticipate selling price and we want to ensure a profit. Now the question is, how much should be the cost of that product to ensure that profit? If the price is specified, now that cost should be the target cost. Now target costing involves setting a target cost by subtracting a desired profit from a comparative market price. So we are going reverse. We first have a comparative market price, and from that comparative market price we deduct the desired profit margin, and the difference is called a cost. It is not the actual cost, it is not the estimated cost, we name it target cost. So this concept has originated mainly from Japan, and if you can take the examples of Sony, Toyota, Swiss watchmakers, they're all using target costing. So these are the real world companies using this concept. And one of the major aim of target costing is to reduce the product life cycle cost. So it is, you can say this is cost control technique, because we got to know the cost at which we should make the product. So we should ensure that we make the product at that cost. If we cannot make the product at that cost, we need to devise various ways to reduce the cost. So in effect, target costing ensures various ways to reduce the life cycle cost. In effect, it is opposite of cost plus pricing. As I told you, conventionally we're doing cost plus pricing. We add profit to the cost to calculate the price. Now we're doing the reverse. From the price, we deduct the profit and we calculate the cost. And that's why it is also named as price-led costing. So see the opposite. Cost plus pricing. It's not pricing based on costing, but it is costing based on pricing. So let's now talk about the steps for the practical implementation of target costing. So there are some 5 to 6 steps which, if we apply one after the other, then we ensure that we are applying the concept of target costing. Now the very first step is to determine the target selling price. Now how we determine the target selling price? The target selling price means the price at which we should sell the product. Now, how we determine the target selling price? Now, this price we determine on the basis of market research and comparative analysis. So we go to the market with a predefined product. We ask the customer how much they are willing to pay. We look into the market, what our competitors are, how our competitors are pricing the product. So based on the market research and comparative analysis, we determine the price at which we should sell the product in order to be competitive, in order to gain the market share. So the very first step, we arrive at the selling price. Then we determine the target profit, and that target profit is based on the required rate of return. So we do have investments, and based on the required rate of return and multiplying it with the investments, we arrive at the target profit, and we can translate that target profit into per unit target profit. So now we got two things. So we got the selling price and we got the target profit. Now the third step we need to do is we need to deduct the target selling price from the target profit. And if we do this, we arrive at the target cost. So selling price minus profit, we arrive at the cost, and that cost we name it target cost, because this is the cost at which we should make the product. Now we need to estimate, because so far we didn't estimate for the cost of the product. So far we calculate the cost by going in reverse. We calculate the cost from the selling price. Now we need to actually know the actual cost or the estimated cost of the product based on the technical specifications and based on the components of cost. So now we need to calculate and we need to estimate the cost of the product. Based on the material required, based on the labor required, and based on the overheads required. Once we know the actual or estimated cost and we know the target cost, the next step is to deduct the actual or estimated cost from the target cost. So if we deduct this actual or estimated cost and target cost, so estimated cost is the cost at which we estimated to make the product. The target cost is the cost at which we should make the product, whereas the actual cost is the cost at which we did make the product or may make the product in terms of the estimated cost. So the difference between actual or estimated cost and target cost, we call it cost gap. And that is one of the foremost advantages of using target costing, is that it gives you an idea about cost gap. So for example, if the target cost is $20 and you make an estimate that if you make that product, you're going to spend $25. So the difference between $25 and $20 is $5, and that is the cost gap. Now what that cost gap means, that if we make the product according to our estimates, we will be spending $5 more than what we should spend on the product. And this is a problem. Cost gap is a problem, because if we spend $5 more from what we should spend, then that effectively means that our profit will be $5 less than our target profit, and this is definitely we don't want. So cost gap is a problem, and the beauty of this concept is that it gives you an idea about the cost gap at the very early stages, from where you can control the cost gap. And definitely as a final step, we should identify various ways to narrow the cost gap, because if we are able to do this, then we are ensuring our profits. So these are the 5 steps which are required to be implemented for target costing. Now let's have a quick look at the steps diagrammatically. So you can see we started with market research and comparative analysis, and that will help us in understanding the customer requirements and in redefining the product features. So at the very initial stages, we are connected with the market, we're connected with the customer, we understand the customer requirements, we understand what customer likes for our product, what customer dislikes for our product, and then at that stage we are able to define the product features based on the customer requirements and market analysis. So the end result of this whole analysis is that we are able to set the market price, which we call the target market price. And we know exactly how much profit we require. So if we deduct the market price, if we deduct the required profit from the market price, then we arrive at our target, and that is the target of the cost. That is the cost at which we should make the product if we want to ensure the profit we require. Now, what if we are not able to achieve the target, and what if the estimated cost is greater than the target cost? So here is another diagrammatic representation of what we're talking about. So we calculate the target cost based on the selling price and the required profit, and then we get an estimate of the cost based on the technical specifications of the product. So based on the estimated cost and the target cost, we get an idea of the cost gap, and that is the main thing we need to understand in target costing. So once we know that there is a cost gap, we need to design cost out of the product. We need to apply various techniques, which could include value analysis or value engineering. In the last few slides, I will be talking about these two techniques, value analysis and value engineering. But the basic idea is, if there is a cost gap, you need to eliminate some material or some labor or some overheads, and that is highly possible if you could redesign the product, because we know that most of the cost is locked into the design phase. By changing the design, we can eliminate some of the costs, and that's why we are saying that we can design cost out of the product. And if we are successfully able to do it, and if we are successfully able to redesign the product, and if we are able to adopt creative ways of reducing the cost, then definitely we can ensure that our actual cost would be closer to the target and we got the profit which we desire for. Now let's have a look at the practical example of target costing. So in this example, HPI is a company which is performing a target costing analysis of hearing aid HPI2, which sells for $750 and the cost is $650. And this company has 30% of the market. However, a competitor has introduced a new model that incorporates a computer chip that improves quality. So that changes the market dynamics. It costs us $1,200. Consumer analysis indicate that cost-conscious consumers will remain loyal to HPI as long as the price does not exceed $600. So because of the change in the comparative position, we can no longer sell the product greater than 600. If we do it, the customer might switch to the competitor which is providing a better quality product. So the only way we could sell to our customers is to reduce the price. So previously we were selling at $750. Now we cannot sell greater than 600. And now HPI wants to maintain the current rate of profit. So if you can look, initially their cost is $650, they're selling for $750, so they're having a profit of $100. So still they want to have a profit of $100. Now how they can do it? They cannot exceed the selling price. Now they cannot sell it for $750, they can only sell for $600. So if they can sell for $600 and if they want a price of profit of $100, then the only way they could do it is that they can reduce the cost, and they should reduce the cost by $150, because now the target cost would be $500, which is $650 minus $150. So the company has identified three alternatives. So once there is a cost gap, once you have to reduce the cost, then you talk about the various options. So this company has got three alternatives. Alternative A is to reduce R&D, replace some parts, and change inspection procedures. So by doing all this, there are possible savings of $150, which is desired. They could also keep R&D as it is, and just by replacing parts and changing inspection procedures, they could save $150. And the third alternative is that instead of decreasing or keeping R&D as same, they could increase R&D and develop a computer chip type hearing aid, which their competitors does, replace parts, change inspection procedures, renegotiate new supplier contract, and with all these changes, again, there is a cost saving of $150. So out of the three alternatives, if any one of these three alternatives could be applied, the company would be able to bring its cost down from $650 to $500, and in that way, by selling the product at $600, they can ensure a profit of $100, which they were getting previously. But which of the three options is better? So the company decided to choose alternative C. The main reason is that by increasing R&D will improve the firm's competitive position in the future, because once the competitor is there with a good product, with a quality product, and you don't match it, then you again are losing out of the competition. So third option not only ensures the guaranteed profit, but also ensures the better competitive position in the future. And the move is strategically important because new technology may be dominant in the future. Right now, the loyal customers may be still buying the product because of the lesser price, but in future, better technology products will prevail. So alternative C is better. Let's now talk about the benefits of target costing. Now, this could be a part of the discursive question exam, or this could be part of objective type questions. So it is very important that you should be able to reflect upon the benefits of target costing. So one of the benefits of target costing is that it helps to improve the understanding within a company of product cost. Now, we have been going through this syllabus area B, where we are studying about activity-based costing and life cycle costing. Now, most of these concepts give you a better understanding of the cost, and that is one of the greater advantage of all these modern management accounting techniques. They gives you greater visibility, they gives you an idea, that takes you to the future, they connect you to the things outside the company. So that, again, the target costing as well gives a company better understanding of the product cost. Secondly, it recognizes that the most effective way of reducing cost is to plan and control costs from product design stage onward. Now, this is exactly the same with other techniques as well. Instead of making the product, going to the market, and then realizing that you have overspent, you should be doing this before launching the product. So before launching the product, you should connect with the market, you should understand the market dynamics, and you should understand what customer is ready to pay, and you should arrive at the cost which you should be making the product, and then at that stage you should decide about the change in the design or any other thing you could do for reducing the cost to its required target. So this is one of the greater advantage of target costing. Third, it helps you create a focus on the final customer for the product or service, because the concept of value is important. Target cost should be achieved without loss of value for the customer. Now, it connects you to the customer at the very first stage, rather than conventional way of pricing where you make the product and you calculate the price and then you go to the market and the customer then looks at your product and you do this free sampling and you do the advertising and all that stuff to increase the demand. So here the demand is created right from the day one. When you go to the market, you ask the customer, this is the product we want to launch, how much you're willing to pay. So the customer knows the product beforehand, and when the product is launched, customer knows it already. So again, this is the advantage of target costing, that it focused on the customer right from the day one. Naturally, it can improve overall product quality, because when you talk to the customer gives their views about what they want from the product. When you review the cost, and when you try to reduce the cost, you actually review the product features and the quality as well. So it gives you more opportunity to think about the cost and the ways to reduce the cost by not affecting the quality. It facilitates coordination of design, manufacturing, marketing, and cost managers throughout the product cost and life cycles. So definitely the cost reduction is not possible unless you do a coordinated work. So unless the design team and the manufacturing team and the marketing team, they are in coordination with each other, it is not possible to reduce the cost. So target costing facilitates the coordination between all team who are responsible, and they sit together, they talk about the various ideas to bring the cost to the required level. And finally, target costing can be used together with recognized methods for reducing costs, such as value analysis, value engineering, just-in-time purchasing, production. So with other techniques, and there are a few slides about these techniques at the end. So with other techniques, target costing enables to reduce the cost, and that is one major advantage we're talking throughout this concept. How to reduce the cost gap? There could be several ways, but few of them are mentioned here. One thing is that we can redesign the products and make use of common processes and components, which means standard components, by changing the customized component with the standard components and making processes more common. We are actually able to reduce the cost. We can talk to the suppliers, and we can negotiate and collaborate with our suppliers, and we can try find out various ways of reducing the cost by talking with our suppliers. So we can also switch our suppliers, or we can talk to our existing suppliers for giving us a material at lesser price. And one of the way of reducing the cost gap is to eliminate non-value-added activities. Now, non-value-added activity is an activity which does not add value to the customer. So by eliminating all non-value-added activities, now for example, all the wait time, so the time which is required for the material to be brought into the stores, and from the stores to the factory floor, and then the time it takes for the inventory to be processed, and all these wait time are actually non-value-added activities. So we can reduce these non-value-added activities, we can reduce the cost. Then we can achieve economies of scale to reduce the cost, because we know that producing in large quantities will reduce unit cost, as the fixed cost is spread to the larger number of units, and per unit fixed cost falls, so total cost per unit falls. This is one common method, and we can also achieve cost reductions as a result of the learning curve. The learning curve means that once we do a standard work over and over, the labor takes lesser time, and because of that learning curve, the time per unit reduces, and because of the reduction in time, our labor cost gonna reduce. So by using the standard components and standard processes, and we can take advantage of the learning curve as well, and in this way we can reduce the cost. Finally, we can train our staff to work more efficiently. We can train them with more efficient methods and techniques, and that will not only increases their efficiency, but that will also decrease the cost. So once we identify cost gap, we can apply various ways of reducing the cost gap, and those ways could relate to the material, could relate to the labor, could relate to the manufacturing overheads, could relate to the suppliers, could relate to the mass production. So we need to apply these methods, just like in the example we discussed. they apply a combination of methods to reduce the cost by 150. So likewise, we talk about some of the methods which could be applied in and individually or in a combined manner to reduce the cost. Now, formally, we can put all those ways of reducing cost into a method we call value analysis. Now, value analysis, or we also call it value engineering or cost engineering, is a technique in which firms' products are subjected to critical and systematic examination by a small group of specialists. So this small group of specialists could include the product designers and the manufacturing supervisors, the people from the quality control department, the people from R&D department. So this small group of specialists, they sit together and they critically and systematically examine the product of the company and sometimes also the product of the competitor, and they ask various questions and they look at each feature of the product and they consider whether that feature is necessary at all, or we can eliminate some of the features of the product, or we can replace some of the parts with some other parts by not affecting the overall quality of the product. So these small group of specialists, they actually do the reverse engineering and they look at the product, they break it into the components and they ask critical questions about the design and the various parts and the procedures used in making that product. And the end goal is to reduce the cost gap. And this cost gap in itself can be reduced in many ways, and we talk about these ways in the previous slide as well. The team could identify some of the features of the product design which may need some innovations, or which may need some of the non-valued activities to be eliminated. The team identified the economies of scale or the learning curve advantages. And the bottom line is that we need to reduce the cost gap. But in this value analysis, one thing is very important. We have to reduce the cost, but overall the quality of the product and the concept of value to the customer shall not, especially the esteem value, shall not be affected. So in that context, we shall know that there are 4 different values which we consider in value analysis. So the first value is the cost value. This is the cost incurred by the firm in incurring the product. So if the firm incurs $100 in making the product, the cost value is $100. But then with that product, the customer may be willing to pay $150, and this is the price at which customer is willing to exchange and obtain the ownership of the product. So that is the exchange value. Now these are 2 basic values attached to the product, the cost which is incurred in making the product and the price at which the customer is willing to buy that product. Now the more important price, a more important value is in the use value, which relates to the technical features and functionality of the product. So whatever function the product is built for, whether the product delivers that functionality and to what extent the product delivers that functionality and how good the product delivers that functionality, that will determine the use value. But over and above, there is another value which is the prime focus of value analysis, and that is the esteem value. That relates to the status or the feel of the product which customer attached to. So if the customer feel good and feel elevated and feel esteemed, and it could be a status symbol, that means the product has good esteem value, and that esteem value then helps the company in generating premium and skimming the market. Now the ultimate goal of value analysis is to reduce the cost value, but not at the expense of esteem value. So one should be very careful. So this team of specialists is usually very careful in devising various ways to reduce the cost value, but not to reduce the esteem value, because esteem value is very important and we need to maintain that esteem value at any cost in value analysis. So let's now do some of the contextualization of the concept. So now let's try to apply the concept in a different context, and generally the two different contexts are discussed in the paper. We either have to consider the concept in the context of a public sector or service industry. So if you want to apply the target costing to a service industry, then first of all we need to understand that service industries have different characteristics than the manufacturing industries. So we must appreciate the differences in the context before we can actually talk about whether we can apply this concept or not, or if we can apply, to what extent we can apply, and what difficulties we face. So as a student, you should try to reflect upon the different characteristics of the service industry. So the one of the characteristic is intangibility. So what intangibility effectively means is that it is very difficult to define the service, and when it is difficult to define the service, it is then difficult to attribute the cost to that service. Now, for example, what a high quality restaurant is providing. So what service they are providing? They are providing good food, or they are providing good experience? So what actually is the main service they are providing, and what cost could be attributed to that service? So that is one thing. It is very difficult to define the service. Then is an element of inseparability. Now, inseparability, unlike manufacturing companies where you can separate the production with the consumption, so product is produced and then it is consumed, there is kind of simultaneity in the production and consumption of services. So services are being produced and consumed at the same time, which makes it difficult to apply various concepts. Then there is a concept of heterogeneity. Now, heterogeneity means that quality and consistency varies. So even the same service varies in one time period to another, and that may be because of the absence of various standards or benchmarks. So you go to the same restaurant, you go to the same mechanic, and 2 different times you got 2 different experiences in terms of service. So there is a great variety, and the quality and consistency of service varies. And then is the concept of perishability, which means that you cannot store the services for future. The services perish as they are as they are produced. So we cannot handle supply-demand problems through production scheduling and inventory techniques. And finally, there is no transfer of ownership. Services do not result in the transfer of property. The purchase of a service only confers on the customer access to a right or use a facility. Now, with all the different characteristics of service industry, we can say that it is very difficult to apply the concept of target costing to the service industry. So the concept is generally applied to manufacturing industries. When it comes to service industries, it is very difficult to apply. We cannot exclude it altogether. We can still apply, but some of these unique characteristics of service industries makes it very difficult to apply. And I told you in the previous slide as well, the products are non-standardized, non-customized, and high proportion of costs in service industries are indirect. So unlike manufacturing companies where the product costs comprises of direct cost, in service industries high proportion is indirect cost, and it is therefore harder to reduce this on a product by product basis. Also, if we apply the concept of target costing in service industry, that effectively means that we will be looking at various ways of reducing the cost. But in service industries, reducing cost may consider synonymous to the reducing the quality of the product. So in manufacturing industries, these cost savings are possible, but in service industries, it is highly likely that the cost reduction will result in the less quality or lesser experience to the customers. So what are the implications of target costing? So that's normally the end of the last bit. We generally talk about every concept. So if we apply the concept, what are the implications? So this concept, like other concepts of activity-based costing and life cycle costing, definitely has implications for pricing, cost control, and performance measurement. So definitely target costing can be used with pricing policy for companies' product or services. It is definitely used for cost control. Rather, mainly it is used for cost control, and it does have a performance measurement emphasis as well. Cost savings can be sought over the entire life cycle, and there is a concept of joint responsibility. All teams are responsible for reducing the cost. The staff is empowered to reduce the cost, and finally, that their performance is reflected by the extent they help in reducing the cost. So by applying the concept of target costing, one can ensure that the pricing of the product is competitive. There are possibilities of cost control and cost savings, and then in terms of performance measurement, it has implications because various people inside the organization are responsible for reducing the cost, so their performance will be effectively measured to what extent they can reduce the cost. And to an extent an organization is able to reduce the cost, definitely it does have performance implications for the organization as a whole. So let's now understand the concept through a demonstration question. So this is a small question which gives you enough idea about how the concept of target costing could be applied and how the important constructs of target costing could be calculated. So in this question, there is a company which has designed a new product, NP8. It currently estimates that in the current market, the product could be sold for 70 per unit. So this is the anticipated selling price. And a gross profit margin of at least 30% on the selling price would be required. So this is the target profit. Now, one thing is very obvious, that if I deduct 30% of the selling price, which is the gross margin, and that makes it 621, then the target cost here is 49, because we can sell the product for 70 and we want a profit of 21. So if we can make the product for 49, then that means that we can ensure the profit of 21. So 49 is the target cost here. Now we are given an estimate. A cost estimation study has produced the following estimate of the production cost for NP8. Now, cost item and then the cost. Direct material M1 is 9 per unit, so there is no extra information. So the estimated material cost for M1 is simply $9. For direct material M2, it says each unit of product NP8 will require 3 meters of material M2, but there will be a loss in production of 10% of the material used, and material cost $1.8 per meter. Now, very simply, it requires 3 meters, but then 10% of the material will be lost in production. So effectively, they need more than 3 meters. So if I calculate this, 3 divided by 0.9 is 3.33. So they need 3.33 meters, so that 10% is lost. Still they have 3 meters. And then cost of 1 meter is 1.8. So 3.33 times 1.8, that is then 6. So material M2 cost is 6. Direct labor, each unit will require 0.5 hours. However, it is expected that there will be unavoidable idle time equal to 5%. So if 0.5 hours are required and 5% is anticipated idle time, then effectively they need 0.5263 hours, and the rate per hour is $19. So if I multiply this by 19, the labor cost per unit is 10. And then we are given production overheads. It is expected that production overheads will be absorbed into the product cost at the rate of 60 per direct labor hour for each active hour worked. Now we know that active hour worked is 0.5 times 60. So the overheads per unit are 30. Now if we add all these estimates as it is, 9 plus 6 plus 10 plus 30, then that equals to 55. So 55 is the estimated cost. Now what does the question require? The question requires you to calculate the expected cost of the product. Now I did this calculation before, so that is 55. The question requires you to calculate the target cost. So initially, in the very beginning, I calculated the target cost, so that is 49. The question requires you to calculate the size of the cost gap. So our estimated cost is 55. We should make this product as 49. So there is a cost gap of 6, right? So this is how this is calculated. I already explained you all these points. Direct material M1 9, direct material M2 6, labor of 10, overheads of 30, expected full cost of 55. If we deduct profit from selling price, so we got the target cost. The difference between estimated cost and target cost is cost gap. Now we all know that once we know that there is a cost gap of 6, then the company should identify various ways of closing this cost gap. And one of the obvious way which is possible, because in this question it is clearly mentioned in M2 in direct labor, there is a loss in production, so we can avoid that loss, and there is an estimated idle time, so we can avoid that idle time because idle time is a non-value added activity. Also loss in production is a non-value added activity, so very simply we can avoid some of the cost by making full use of the material. And finally, we could also suggest some other ways which can include replacing the material with the standard material. We can suggest advantages of economies of scale, but obviously because the question does not give us enough information, we can only speculate on the various ways of reducing the cost. But two definite ways which are possible here is to avoid the loss in production of material and unavoidable idle time. Rest of the speculations we can, rest of the points we can give as a prescription, but definitely the scenario of the question is not enough to give an idea about those things. So that is the demonstration question. That shows how the concept of target costing is applied and how cost gap is calculated, which is one of the main concept of this target costing. So that's it, and the next few lectures I will be doing some more practice questions, OD cases, and bigger questions, possibly objective types as well. So stay tuned. Thank you. Bye bye.